Alrighty, welcome everybody. I hope everybody is having a great start to their day, a great afternoon. I know we're all in different time zones, so as you join, just please put your name, pronouns, organization, and an emoji just to show how your day is going in the chat. You guys can please put any questions you may have in the Q&A so they don't get buried in the chat, and we'll try to cover as many as we can. And the recording, slides, and other materials will be available next week and emailed to you through Zoom, but we'll be dropping the links to the slides in the chat as well.
So hello, everyone. We'll go ahead and introduce ourselves. I'm one of the speakers. My name is Marcella Seals. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a National Youth Advisory Council member through the National Network for Youth.
And my name is CJ. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a National Youth Advisory Council member as well, and the founder and executive director of Break the System Project, a youth led nonprofit located on the south side of Chicago, aimed to end youth poverty by offering wraparound support, spaces for creative expression, and systematic advocacy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tori Ikeda. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a member of the National Network for Youth's NYAC, the National Youth Advisory Council. I'm also a master's social work student at my local university, the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm also a Hawaii Youth Peer Support Specialist here in Hawaii on the island of Oahu, where I'm joining you folks from today. And I'm going to kick us off to share what our agenda is. And I see a lot of people are blowing up our chat. We're coming from all over. I see Washington. Awesome. So for today, we're going to be starting off with going over the federal policy landscape, also knowing what our rights are, what's the key rights for our young people to know, gender affirming care and supports, and then taking action and doing a self-assessment. And then just some background on National Network for Youth, or NM4Y. It's a nonprofit working to prevent and end youth homelessness. We work with youth with lived expertise of homelessness, youth homelessness service providers, and advocates across the country. And all three of us presenters, like we've said, we're on the National Network for Youth's National Youth Advisory Council, or NYAC, and we've developed and co-created the Know Your Rights toolkit that we'll be sharing a bit about today.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to briefly go over the acronym 2SLGBTQIA. This term has expanded over the years, and we understand that sometimes it can be a little confusing. So I'm going to briefly go over each letter. So 2S stands for Two-Spirit, which is a gender identity only used by Native American/Indigenous folks. L is for lesbian, G is for gay, B is for bisexual, T is for transgender, Q is for queer, I is for intersex, A is for asexual, and the plus signs represents many identities that are not explicitly listed. So that could be non-binary, pansexual, gender fluid, gender nonconforming, agender, and so on.
So, the American Civil Liberations Union, also known as ACLU, is currently tracking 530 anti 2SLGBTQIA plus bills in the US. So, the Know Your Rights group has put together this webinar to spread awareness on your rights as 2SLGBTQIA youth. And all of these categories I'm going to go over today have the minimum right to be free from discrimination on the basis of race, ethnic group, identification, ancestry, national origin, color, religion, sex, mental or physical disability, or HIV status. So, we're going to hop into housing. When it comes to your right as as far as housing, you should have equal access to shelter, transitional housing, and permanent housing programs, meaning you should not be turned away because of your 2S LGBTQIA plus identity. Um, so you should be housed according to your gender identity and what makes you feel most safe and comfortable. Even still, most programs are more inclusive than others. So it's best to do your research when it comes to housing and looking for 2S LGBTQIA plus affirming statements and information on those shelters and housing websites. When it comes to healthcare, while you have the legal right to not be discriminated against because of your identity, there is sadly no federal law that protects your right to receive gender affirming care. So, this is determined by state law and by individual program policies. Access to gender affirming care is even more restricted to minors. So there are two trackers hyperlinked in our toolkit you can use to see if your state has banned gender affirming healthcare for minors. And also, in some states, minors need parent or guardian consent to receive healthcare services, which we also have a link within the toolkit that you can check for your state laws as well. The next right that we'll dive into will be employment. So a 2020 Supreme Court decision stated that people cannot be discriminated against in employment based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. This decision only applies to organizations with 15 or more employees. So this is a legal right that does not exist in some other areas. Some states or local governments have additional protections for 2S LGBTQIA plus employees, but all states must follow the federal protection at minimum. And you can check out the toolkit to see what laws your state has related specifically to employment. And yeah, we're going to jump into education now. So when it comes to education, if you are a K through 12 student experiencing homelessness, there is no federal law that protects. There is a federal law that protects your right to stay in your public school of choice. You also have the right to not be discriminated against because of your identity, including bullying or harassment. However, there are sadly many 2S LGBTQIA plus legal right issues that are being fought about in courts across the country, particularly around rights for transgender students. You'll need to check with an adult at school who you trust, like a teacher, coach, or homeless liaison, to see what your school's policies are. And if you want to dive deeper into your legal rights, please review the Know Your Rights toolkits developed by the National Network for Youth. This resource is specifically tailored for individuals ages 13 to 25 who are navigating homelessness independently without a parent or guardian. And furthermore, there's like a specialized checklist within all of these categories that I've went over today that can kind of assist you in verifying that your rights are being upheld as a 2S LGBTQIA plus youth. And I'm going to pass it over to Marcellus.
Thank you, CJ. Much appreciated. Okay. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Marcella Sills. I use they, them pronouns. I'm from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And today I will be touching on gender affirming care and support for youth and young adults. So gender affirming care for youth and young adults. So gender affirming care for unhoused youth encompasses medical, psychological, and social support services that help validate a young person's gender identity. So for a lot of unhoused youth, this serves as a critical safety net. So this provides a foundation needed to survive life while being housing and secure. It helps reduce suicide rates and eventually transition to stable housing. So there's 4 bullet points we're going to go over. Access to gender affirming healthcare. So this includes connecting young people to 2S LGBTQ healthcare providers. That means healthcare providers that provide HRT, top surgery, bottom surgery, and overall affirming mental health services. This also includes access to affirming resources, providing binders, gender affirming clothing, and other items that support self-expression and identity. Safe housing. This ensures access to affirming housing with trained staff, with also gender appropriate placements and anti-discrimination policies intact. And then mental health support. So this offers trauma-informed therapy and peer support tailored to each 2SLGBTQIA young person. Respecting pronouns. So I'm going to briefly touch on this, but why respecting pronouns and chosen names is a part of client safety. So each person's identity is self-defined. So this is why it's so important to always use the name and pronouns a young person asks you to use, or in general, regardless of their legal identification or how you personally perceive their appearance. So this is why it's important to have the conversation and just ask questions. So ask simply, what pronouns do you use? And also follow up with that. Identify who, when, and where you can use what pronouns. So for example, if a client, let's say a client or a family member is just needing sorry about that. Let's say someone calls on their behalf. So you need to identify what pronoun you can use. A client might use she, her pronouns, with you as a staff, but they might use he, him pronouns with their family or friends. And also it's important to identify this on legal documents as well. And then also follow up and ask, what name would you like me to use? Doing the same thing, identifying who, when, and where you can use each pronoun. And this is why it's important to create a safe space where you're normalizing using your own pronouns. So I'll use an example of mine. Hi, my name is Marcellus. I use they, them pronouns. If you normalize using pronouns within your agency or company, this can make a young person feel safer to share their pronouns without you having to ask. And just continuing this slide, normalizing chosen names in documents. As we all know, a lot of times we have to use people's birth names or dead names on legal documents. So it's really important to have a conversation with the agency and ask them if you can use that person's chosen name on the documents. Sometimes it's a no, but if that is a no, you still need to be using that person's chosen name out loud, regardless of what's on legal documents. And it's also really important to have a conversation with that young person and say, hey, unfortunately, we can't put the chosen name on these legal documents, but I will never call you your dead name. So just making that clear and respecting their boundaries. And I think also it's important to make a note, like literally a sticky note writing, hey, this person's dead name is this, but they go by this. So when it comes to case notes, people know how to refer to that person. With that being said, it's really important to maintain confidentiality. So never outing a young person by sharing their dead name or gender identity with other residents, staff, or family members without their explicit informed consent. Doing so can put them in emotional or physical danger. So it's really important, again, asking those questions. Hey, what name can I use out loud? What name can I use with family? And most importantly, harm is going to happen. And when I say harm, misgendering, dead naming, whether it be intentionally or unintentionally. So it's important if you accidentally misgender or dead name someone that you acknowledge that what you did, you apologize. So for example, I use they, them pronouns. Sometimes people refer to me as she, and, I will be like, hey, those are not my pronouns. Instead, they will say, I apologize, Marcellus. And they move forward without making it a big deal, because a lot of times the individual that is doing the harm, and when I say harm, misgendering, even if it's not on purpose, makes a big deal out of it than the person that was actually harmed. So it's really important to acknowledge what you did, correct yourself, and move on without centering your own discomfort. 2SLGBTQIA liaison support. So pretty much, I'm sure we're all familiar with liaisons, but I'm going to briefly go over this. Liaison acts as a direct bridge and guiding support system for queer youth. They connect young people and their families to safe, identity-affirming resources. This includes healthcare, housing, and legal assistance, kind of what CJ was mentioning in the toolkit, while also removing the barriers of navigating complex systems alone. So there's 3 bullet points I'm going to go over with this. So this includes resource navigation. It's really important in general that agencies are creating intentional relationships with outside agencies. So in case you as an agency don't have those resources, you can refer them to other people. So this means working one-on-one with young adults to clarify their exact needs, coordinate referrals to vetted identity affirming mental slash physical healthcare providers, employment, legal resources, and education. And it's really important that you're creating relationships with 2SLGBTQIA organizations. So you can kind of bridge the gap between resources and young people. This goes into provider training. So the liaison can help lead these 2S LGBTQIA trainings, or as we like to say, like cultural competency trainings, and provide ongoing support to help staff and providers deliver affirming, culturally responsive, and trauma-informed services, because you don't know what you don't know. So it's really important that you're having at least quarterly trainings by people who are part of the 2S LGBTQIA community. This also includes inclusive policies. So making sure that you're reviewing, developing, and supporting implementation of policies that protect the young people and the staff, and also including non-discrimination, gender inclusion, and confidential affirming practices. So this means, even, for example, a lot of agencies have a drop-in center. Sometimes with the drop-in center, they have clothing closets. And it's really important that you don't separate the clothing closets by gender, because that could create another barrier for that young person. So even something as simple as that. Comprehensive wraparound supports. So this kind of goes hand in hand with having a liaison, but they are two totally different things. So queer youth, they thrive when they have access to coordinated identity affirming support that addresses their whole well-being. Comprehensive wraparound services should include at least 4 of these things. Housing support. So this means access to safe, affirming housing and shelter options that respect gender identity, expression, and sexuality. This also includes case management, assisting navigating housing, education, employment, benefits, and legal systems. And something I kind of want to touch on too is that a lot of the young people that are in these programs, are trying to legally change their name. So it's also really important that you have a connection with like legal systems or court systems, so you can figure out how to navigate that. And sometimes the agencies can pay for the legal name change. That happened in my case, where the agency paid for mine. So it's really important to create those relationships. This also includes natural supports, connections to supportive adults, chosen families, peer networks, and community resources. Young people need more than housing to survive. They need community as well. And going into community connections, which includes linking youth to affirming organizations, cultural spaces, and social networks that promote belonging and long-term stability. So this is really, really, really important. Sometimes agencies have like support groups, or they're referencing young people to organizations. And this is kind of where it comes in. Sometimes young people don't have community around them. They might not have a supportive family. They might not have chosen family. So it's really important that you have either a support group on campus, or again, a liaison on campus. So if they need to reach out to someone, they need resources, they can do that. So now I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Tori to talk about taking action.
Thanks, Marcellus. So we've talked a lot about the landscape, our rights, and support and tools. And I really want to center all of this information on what are the ways that we can support, empower, and connect with young people. And we can't control every environment, because the truth is not every space is going to be a safe space. But what we can control is how we're showing up, how we can uplift concerns, and how we can push for change within our organizations, as individuals, and as a community. So we'll walk through these 4 concrete areas around, gender affirming products, resources, protections, and continued staff training, which Marcellus also touched a bit on in their previous slides. Can we go to the next slide, please? So going into resources, so knowing where to send someone in a moment of need can make a huge difference. So on the hotline side, there's a few key ones to keep in your back pocket, like the LGBT National Hotline. And they have a few different programs, including the Coming Out Support Hotline. And they also have a dedicated youth talk line. And they have chat rooms as well. So they have chat rooms for youth who are 19 years old and younger that are available. And they also have a one-on-one peer support chat line, so these options can be more comfortable for some young people, but they have a lot of different resources just within this one organization. And then there's another uh, organization called the Trans Lifeline, and they're another peer support line that connects trans people to community support and resources. And then there's other handy resources like the Trevor Project for crisis support, the National Runaway Safe Line for youth experiencing homelessness or runaway youth needing help. They can support with finding safe local and national resources, so like housing, counseling, legal aid, other services like that. And then there's the Vital Documents hotline. So if someone needs help accessing documents like an ID or a birth certificate, social security card, you can give them a call for support. And then on the program side, there's two big federal ones to know of. There's the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS or HOPWA, which supports housing for people living with HIV or AIDS. And then similarly, there's Ryan White HIV and AIDS program. They can support with healthcare and medical support services for those living with HIV or AIDS who are underinsured or uninsured. And Marcellus mentioned gender affirming care earlier and how it supports people with living their most authentic parts of themselves. And gender affirming items are like clothing, binders, prosthetics, haircuts, wigs. They're all ways people feel more comfortable and aligned with their gender identity, which can support with, like their well-being, their confidence, just aspects of like everyday life. Um, some of these products might already be available in your organization or your campus. And if they're not, it might be worth exploring to add. And there's some examples here at the bottom where, like, for example, there's a dedicated closet space with labeled bins for items like tucking underwear or bra inserts, or even just including a space where there's a poster with gear, care, and tips. There's also, we wanted to plug these two organizations that are worth knowing, the Queer Trans Project and I Support the Girls. Both provide gender affirming items to folks nationally. And you can also set up a referral pathway either through these organizations or there's also just direct applications, like the one in the middle with the little cat, where young people can submit an application and choose what products and items they would like. Some are national, like these organizations, and some are state specific. But knowing what organizations and what programs are available and creating some sort of pathway or sharing these resources to young people is really handy. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be intentional sharing or setting up some sort of space. And just as important as it is to know what your rights are, it's equally as important to know what do we do when something goes wrong? Who do we contact? So on the bottom right-hand corner, there's a checklist about taking charge of your rights. It's also in the toolkit, but it's something we can share with youth. We can use directly to document when an incident occurs um, and support in creating a report. So when you or a young person or someone you know experiences discrimination or harm that goes against their rights, there are a bunch of different places to report to. And part of the work is making sure that we know and that young people we work with or our peers know that these pathways and these places exist. And making a report can feel really overwhelming, and knowing what the process is just as overwhelming, especially in the moments where you have to break down, what happened, who was there. I have to keep down receipts. So this checklist is really handy in, just breaking down that process and navigating so it's less like, ah. And then also, in addition to the checklist, Lambda Legal, it also has a help desk, which is a great resource in providing general legal information and resources relating to discrimination based on like sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression or HIV status. Um, but yeah, when violence or harm and discrimination happens, it's also equally important that organizations and staff are following their own protocols or have protocols and procedures in place that follow through in protecting individuals and hold people who cause harm or yeah, who cause harm accountable for their actions. So we're not just letting people slide or perpetuating any harm. Um, yeah, that can continue ongoing hurt. And Marcellus also talked a bit about this as well on training. So we can't talk about supporting 2S LGBTQIA plus youth without talking about our ongoing learning, just like how we're here today. And we all know that things are constantly evolving, like best practices, language, even the youth, or not even the needs of young people. So we wanted to also plug these two organizations, True Colors United and Youth Space. Both use facilitators with lived experience in their trainings to support individuals, organizations, communities in creating safer and more affirming environments for 2S LGBTQIA plus youth. Because I'm sure a lot of us know that it's important that the trainings that we have are done by people with lived expertise, because they know firsthand um, knowledge that can't be taught in a book or in a classroom. And now when we zoom out at a individual and an organizational level, we wanted to look at how are we really walking the walk. So we created a self-assessment tool, and it can really just be used as a framework to take inventory on where are we doing really well in, and then also where are areas that we can keep growing. So you folks can scan the QR code to access the assessment directly. It's in a Google Doc, so you can make a copy, and I'd really encourage you folks to take it to your teams, do it individually, whether you're a program director, frontline worker, a peer, somewhere in between. Um, Go through it, and it's not about perfection, checking all the boxes to make sure we're like 100. I'm not 100, and it's not about calling anyone out. It's just continuing to improve and go forward. And Kayla's been dropping the link for all of our resources as well, because I know it's a lot, and it's also just great to refer back to. You folks can click all of these links. You can also click on the little picture of the self-assessment, and it'll take you to the same document that this QR code will also take you to.
Thank you all so much. I think we're going to open up the Q&A. If you guys haven't already, feel free to drop your questions, and we can just go through a couple of them. If it's okay with you guys, I'm happy to say them out loud for you guys to answer. Just looking. Let me see here. Someone asked if more general ways to educate, advocate, and support their own youth advocates and help them like spread the knowledge to their peers.
I would say our new lovely toolkit actually. It serves kind of like as a central, like kind of comprehensive, like frequently asked questions when it comes to just youth rights in general. Doesn't necessarily have to be homelessness. I think these rights kind of touch all youth. And so it kind of is a really helpful tool. Yeah, and it kind of puts all of the information regarding LGBT S2 LGBTQIA rights, youth disability, and several other several other categories. But yeah, it's a great tool to look at and a great tool to reference to as far as educating youth.
Thanks, CJ. We have another question here. Do you know of any resources or advice for youth that are excommunicated from family and community?
This is a really good question. Um, this is actually a very nuanced question, right? Um, that's why I think it's so important that as the like agency or just as an individual, you are sending that young person resources for like support groups or pride events. And when I'm talking about pride events, I'm not talking about just in June, but there are quite a few support groups for individuals that are a part of the 2SLGBTQIA community that are, you know, either disowned or that maybe have no contact with their family because of their behavior. So I think it's really important to find community. I know social media can be a blessing and a curse, but social media can be a good way to see what's going on, whether that be Reddit groups, Facebook groups. I would say, find Facebook, Instagram, search your area and see if they have any support groups for specifically like trans individuals or just for the community in general. I would say Discord is also a really good way to connect with people. There's a lot of young people who use Discord to talk about what's going on in their lives. So social media could be a good way to reach out. And then I think also one thing that I feel like is not talked about is the library. Your local library has a lot of support groups as well. I would say search your local library, see if they have any support groups for the queer community, and you know, see what pops up. I think also asking questions to other people within the community.
That was great. Thanks, Marcellus. Um, Another question is, what are some positive signs that youth look for when they want to find an affirming program, which could be like signs or the way people talk, the way people dress? What are some kind of good things that service providers can do to make a really good welcoming environment?
This is a good question, and y'all can feel free to hop in. I'm sure y'all have other perspectives as well. I would say for me, as someone who is gender nonconforming and trans, something I look for is them simply using my pronouns correctly. I think it's so easy to say we're LGBTQ friendly, but if you can't use someone's pronouns correctly, and if you're corrected and you get defensive, that kind of shows me that you're not a safe space. So I think it's important that you normalize using your own pronouns in conversations. Again, it goes back to using chosen names. I think also having humility. When I say humility, you know, when you misgender or dead name a person, even if it's unintentional, it can feel embarrassing, you know? So I think it's important that you practice that even with your own friends. I would say one positive thing is them having a liaison. Luckily, where I live at, they have a liaison. So I felt safe to be here because I know if something were to happen, people would be held accountable. So having those protections in place. They also have support groups on campus as well. For example, they have a local college here called UCO, University Central Oklahoma, where they come out every month and they do like a pride group. So they might watch a movie with us. They might educate us on a specific topic that's going on, or they might take us to, like, for example, there's a lot of art museums here in Oklahoma. They might take us to an art museum, or they might take us to a place that's owned by a 2S LGBTQ person, or they might have like an elder in the community come and talk to us. So I think it's really important that you have those kind of things. And it just doesn't stop there. I would say as well, not trying to take up too much space, but even having gender affirming clothing on campus or having that reference, not everyone has that, right? But I think it's so important that you're creating those relationships. So again, if you have young people that are needing binders, you can recommend them a binder without them having to pay for it. Binders can be extremely expensive. I think also having someone that can teach that young person, how do you use a binder, how do you wash it, how do you take care of it, those kind of things.
Thank you so much, Marcellus. We also got a couple questions about HUD's equal access rule. If it's all right with you, I might say a few things about that, because National Network for Youth, we are sharing information and collecting stories. So for those of you guys don't know, on April 28th, HUD posted a proposed regulation to change the equal access rule that would eliminate the current federal protections, some of which we talked about. for LGBTQ individuals access to shelters and other HUD programs in ways that, of course, align with their gender identity, or sexual orientation. So what we're doing, we're partnering with Lambda Legal, who Tori mentioned, to uplift stories about the life-saving impacts of the Equal Access Rule. So what different people can do is you can actually submit a comment as an organization or an individual. I'm going to drop a link in the chat that talks more about it and what role you can play. Lambda Legal and ourselves, we have a lot of templates and information on how to share your story in a way that's authentic to you, protects your safety and your sense of mind while still advocating for HUD not to roll back these protections. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat in a moment. Do any of you guys have anything you want to say about the Equal Access Rule, or just more generally how to advocate for LGBTQ issues in a way that's safe and protects who you are? If not, that's okay. All right, in that case, CJ, there was a question for you. Do you know any good agencies serving youth in the Chicagoland suburban area?
Actually, yes. I would say if you can look into UCAN and CETA Chicago, they're really good agencies that kind of work closely with youth and families. And then if you know anyone on the south side of Chicago who might need services, Break the System Project is always open. So, yeah.
Yay, thank you. I think, does anyone have any other major questions? If not, I just want to highlight the toolkit one more time. It's something Marcella, CJ, and Tori all worked on. It's amazing. It's 43 pages long. So there's a section specifically for LGBTQ youth, which is what obviously we spoke about today, but there is also a section for immigrant youth, youth with disabilities, and just general information you need to know related to shelter, food benefits, healthcare, employment, vital documents, police encounters, some other things I can't remember. But if no one else has any questions, I think we're going to go ahead and move on to the next section. Oh, actually, Angel just had a question that was put in the chat on the topic of advocacy. Oh, it's an idea. Or guess, try to find your champions in more local politics and grassroots action. Maybe one of your representatives has signed on to a positive bill and more be willing to ask. That's a really great idea. Thank you, Angel. But in that case, I guess we can move on to the last section, unless Marcella, CJ, Tori, you had any other things you want to talk about? Okay, great. Marcella, so I'll pass it back to you for some announcements.
Thank you all so much. So sorry about that. I'm trying to get my screen to go. Okay. So I'm going to briefly touch on some programs and some announcements from the National Network for Youth. So the Vital Document is a national free resource for youth experiencing homelessness and those that support them to get assistance in obtaining vital documents, including birth certificates and social security cards. Operators are lawyers from Baker McKenzie who provide state-specific help. They are open every Wednesday through call or text. Callers can leave a message outside of Wednesdays, and that call will be returned. And they're actually open today for another hour. So if you have any questions for them, please feel free to give them a call. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Flight raffle. So we're excited to announce a fundraiser that N4Y is doing. The prize is 2 roundup airline tickets worth up to $1,200. All proceeds go directly to the National Networks for Youth's work ending youth homelessness, to create resources like the Know Your Rights toolkit that we talked about today. So if you're interested in doing that, please click the link or go to the National Network for Youth's website. So upcoming events from NN4Y. So please join us for 2 upcoming webinars tomorrow. So one of the webinars tomorrow covers local cross-system collaboratives. So pretty much the application, the application to receive up to 18 months of support for your local community. And in July, we'll provide a federal policy update with the Schoolhouse Connection. And so I just want to say, Yakoke. Yakoke is thank you in Choctaw. So thank you all for joining today. If you haven't already, please sign up for our listserv to stay connected to the work. This webinar recording, slides, and other materials will be available on our website. And this should be all available by next week. So you should receive either an email from Zoom or Kayla. And so once that information once it's completed, it'll be sent out. So I just want to say thank you all so much again for taking time out of your day. I know we're all in different time zones, so it means a lot. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.